Welcome to Realizing Resilience, a podcast from the Connecticut Women's Consortium. We're not behavioral health professionals, but we're your gateway to real conversations with the experts. Each episode, we'll delve into the vast landscape of mental health, from personal stories to expert insights. Together, we'll bridge the gap between clinical expertise and personal experiences, connecting with diverse voices and perspectives. Join us for insightful conversations that demystify the world of mental health.
Kelsey Hust is a social worker, certified prevention specialist, and is a trained tobacco treatment specialist. Kelsey has formal education in community organizing. She has worked in various programs focusing on mental health and substance use work in adult outpatient and EAP, to managing a youth substance prevention program and building an adult outpatient tobacco treatment program. Kelsey is committed to DEI work and has co-chaired a diversity, health equity, and inclusion committee, and is a trained facilitator in Courageous Conversations. Kelsey passionately pursues her work of supporting individuals and communities through empathy and combining macro and micro approaches in her work.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Realizing Resilience. I am Marisa.
And I'm Alana.
And today we have the pleasure of speaking with Kelsey Hust. Kelsey, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. I'm very excited.
So we're going to kick off this conversation we have today with a question, and I'm going to ask, what inspired you to focus on substance use prevention and tobacco treatment as part of your social work and community organizing career?
So it's a little weird, like how I got here. Like I look back and I'm like, how did I get here? So in some ways it was very unplanned. And the way I got here really was saying yes to a lot of different opportunities. So in graduate school, I was really torn between macro social work and micro social work. And I ended up with macro social work, community organizing. And I was growing to really love it. I had an internship in HIV prevention with Department of Public Health, and I loved it. That was like my first step into the world of prevention. When I got out of grad school, I was looking for a job, and I ended up in clinical work, and I also loved that, but I was still missing that like macro piece, and there was an opportunity that presented itself where I could essentially run a coalition and do youth substance prevention work, and I just said yes to that. I said, I have a community organizing background, so I know I have some skills that would be useful. And I said yes, and I ended up just diving right into it. I think on a personal note, and this took me a while to reflect on how I ended up in prevention on a personal note, I've thought about how a lot of people that I love have dealt with addiction and, mental health, those two things going hand in hand. And I've looked back and I've thought, what if prevention had been as funded and as strong as it is today back then for them? Like, would their outcome have been different?
And I think as a society, we know youth vaping is bad, but I think especially with vapes being made of something, people aren't always entirely sure about like why it's bad. So what exactly makes vaping different from other substance use trends, and why is it such a concern, especially among young people?
Yeah. So this one is like tough. So in some ways it's so similar. And I'm thinking from this prevention brain, right? Of like, it's so similar how we're gonna tackle this situation. And there's some really easy ways to compare vaping to other substances, which I'll talk about in a minute. But what makes it different, I'll start with that. What makes it different, I think, is that it's still they're new products. So nicotine itself, we know, has been around for a very long time. So we have plenty of data and research to show why nicotine can be harmful to the body and brain, and especially for a young person, their developing brain and body. Where it's different though is we're seeing all different forms, like different products coming out with vaping. And I think that is always something where we're trying to get ahead of it. But as we tackle one type of vape, right, the companies market and they get really creative, and there's a different type of vape. And I think that's what makes this maybe a little different than some other substances. I recently just read a handout from the CDC about smart vapes, which I'm like shocked that now there is like another level, another new thing to the product, which I definitely expect to talk about in the training. So I think that's what makes it a little bit different.
Quick clarification, are those the ones that like play music and have a screen.
They have screens. Yeah, like I saw one that I don't even know what was on the site. I think it was like a rocket and it lit up. And I was looking at like user reviews where people show it lit up, when you're about to use it. It was so shocking. It took me a minute to absorb it, honestly. Yeah, in other ways, though, it is very similar. Like, when we're addressing why vapes are problematic, we're really focusing on the addictive component, which is nicotine. And we know just how harmful that can be. And I think also considering how youth today, I feel like are great about advocating for more mental health support. I think a big consideration is how vaping and nicotine really affects mental health, like anxiety and depression.
And even I know in my school we did no smoking campaigns and things like that. And so you associate these things with the traditional cigarette. And since vapes look nothing like that, you're not even considering that it could be connected in some way or that it's harmful to you in the same way.
Yeah, I was thinking that's like actually a great point. I was thinking about that. We become removed from the risk because also the scent. So think about like cigarette smell lingers in a different way. And with a vape scent, it's a more appealing smell. Or, we think about how the aerosol dissipates in, a different way than cigarette smoke does. And I think that is where we have to work extra hard in prevention to really educate people.
So speaking of training, you'll be leading the youth vape prevention training on March 5th, which is focusing on reducing youth vaping through strategic prevention framework. Can you explain this framework to us and just kind of describe your teaching style and kind of any activities that participants might be expecting during this training?
Yeah, definitely. So for anybody who's listening, I did not invent the strategic prevention framework. SAMHSA did, and it's also called the SPF, just for short. But it's an amazing tool. It's very useful, and the ways that it's really useful in the world of prevention is that it helps you use evidence-based practice, identify needs and gaps in the community when you're about to do substance prevention work. It kind of guides you in being able to assess your progress and making sure that what you're doing is sustainable. And then another big part is also cultural competency, or what I also like to add in is cultural responsiveness, meaning that we should continue to strive to have a deeper cultural understanding and make sure the diversity in our community is being valued and supported while we're doing the prevention work. That part should never stop. And the same with sustainability as well. So when I run a training, my goal is for it to always be engaging. I want to have an environment that supports people asking questions along the way. When you run a training, people are like, you're the expert, which is true, but also I genuinely feel that there's plenty of people in the room that have great information to add in. So I like to support that during my trainings. And even though we're having a lot of serious conversations a lot of times during trainings, I like to be able to add in humor where possible. I use visuals, and people who take this training, can expect to have a fun, engaging activity that has something to do with the milligrams of nicotine in a vape compared to cigarettes. I'm going to leave a little mystery there.
Keep them wanting more.
So I'm assuming most of the people who are going to attend your training will be working with children in some capacity. But for clinicians or community members who don't typically work with children, what can kind of the average person do to address youth vaping or to help support prevention efforts?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I find that a lot of times people feel very nervous about this idea of it's like, well, I don't know. People say, I don't know anything about this. And I really, really want to encourage people to try to push past that. I'm going to give some ways you can get involved, but I really want to encourage people to kind of take that leap because you'll have plenty of support when you are getting yourself into some form of prevention. So, things people can do is join their local prevention council or LPC. People might also call it a substance coalition or something similar. Many towns have those, and if you just do a quick search online, you'll be able to find one close to you. I find a lot of councils or coalitions are very welcoming of new members, and a key part actually of having a really well-run coalition or local prevention council is having people that are not just experts at the table. They're really looking for young people, people with lived experiences, parents and caregivers, Teachers are great, just general members of the public. Also, something I like to talk about is keeping an eye on your Board of Ed and town meetings, taking a look at their agendas. If there is an opportunity for you to support maybe an ordinance or something going in place that supports substance prevention, I say keep an eye on those so you can either write something in or speak during public comment or just show up to show support during one of those meetings. And then things like parent and teacher committees or PTAs are great. If you want to dig deeper into policy, you could look on the Connecticut General Assembly website. And there's also political advocacy trainings out there. So I know that can get scary sometimes for people, but it's very empowering when you can say, I was involved, I wrote in, I submitted testimony to support something so big, like something that's really going to keep youth safe.
I'm very excited. This is different than a lot of trainings we've done, so I'm really excited we're hosting this. I used to teach, so I also
Oh,
totally
that's awesome.
understand. Yeah, it was wonderful, but a lot. But yeah, vaping has just become so normalized in youth culture, and I'm excited about the conversation. It seems like we're moving in a positive direction in terms of like people recognizing the harm.
Yeah, no, I agree. I'm glad to hear that this is a little different. My goal is just like to get as much information out as possible because I remember like when I was new in the field, I spent so long information gathering and checking things and calling people and that was great, but like I want to be able to give people a place where they have like a starting point and they can take stuff with them.
I didn't even consider kind of keeping an eye on Board of Ed or like town hall, city hall type things and being a part of the community and prevention efforts and stuff like that. Obviously, the Board of Ed would or should be involved in this in some way. And I was like, yeah, coalitions, that makes sense. But Board of Ed is definitely something that people have access to or can know about in the public, even if you're not involved having a child in that school. So yeah, definitely a good tip. I'll have to write that down somewhere.
And I actually just thought of another thing is RBHAOs. So, throughout the regions in Connecticut, for anybody who doesn't know, there's somebody who kind of has usually those funds to do prevention work or gives you funds to be the local prevention council. So if you search like RBHAO, Connecticut in your town, you'll find who that is. And you can always outreach them too, because usually they're doing so many different forms of prevention. And there's usually plenty of committees and they usually welcome volunteers.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us and for sharing a little bit more about this.
Thank you.
Yeah, I really appreciate you talking with us. This was a great conversation.
I loved it. I'll come back anytime.
Specifically on March 5th.
Yes.
Marissa's the queen of a segue.
I love a good segue. I do.
That was so good.
Links will be in the description to learn more about Kelsey and sign up for her training, Youth Vape Prevention, on March 5th. Check out our links below to keep up with us at the Connecticut Women's Consortium. And we thank you for tuning in today. I'll see you next time.